Welcome to Navigating Receiverships, a podcast from the Commercial Receivers Association, focused on building a better understanding of what brings companies into receivership, what happens in receivership, what makes them unique, some alternatives to receiverships, and ultimately, what happens to the business as the receivership is closed out. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Morcheski, CRA board member and CEO of Nimble Strategies. Welcome to Navigating Receiverships. I'm Eric Morcheski, your host. I'm here today with Gene Buccola, the CEO of High Plateau Asset Management. Gene, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about you and your background?
Good morning, Eric. Yes, I'm a lifetime real estate person. I've had my real estate license since 1977. Also, long history in banking and special credits, navigating with various industries within the banking industry, the auto dealerships, new construction loans, and then special credits within that space as well. Then in 1977, got my real estate broker's license, and then brokered most of my career throughout Oregon, Washington, Idaho, the Pacific Northwest primarily, until jumping into the receivership world a few years ago.
And I can always see that real estate agent in you because you've got that hustle to go build new relationships and find new work that is just so incredible. I always love watching how you kind of build and grow that web that you continue to operate out of in the receivership space.
And I think that no matter what space you're in, what we are as receivers, especially, I guess, especially as receivers, is that we are connectors. And by connecting, we're always in the middle of a situation. We've got a plaintiff and a defendant, and you've got representation on both sides, and may have investors. I've got one right now that's got plaintiff has his counsel, the defendant has their counsel, the investors have their counsel, the borrower has their counsel, and there's a lot of people that we as receivers we act as a connector, and that's what we do. And I think having that ability to navigate, the name of this the name of this podcast is Navigating Receiverships, and I think that's what we do every day in this space is navigate. And by navigating, it's connecting and having a team around you, and also being well respected within the industry because it's a very small industry. I've come to find out in my travels of meeting with and chatting with creditor rights attorneys and bankers, and it's everybody knows everybody else. And I think it's important that connecting aspect is very important.
We have to navigate this. It's an industry that's hard to get into. It's easy to get out of if you're not doing good work in it.
Right,
Uh,
exactly.
So tell us a little bit about High Plateau and what work you guys do beyond just the receivership space.
High Plateau Asset Management is a part of a larger organization, High Plateau Capital, founded by my brother John Buccola in 2014. And with its beginnings was in aviation. We were in the aviation space. We owned a 135 certificate, charter certificate. We have and we currently manage aviation real estate, aircraft hangars in the Seattle area. We also have another LLC, Meridian Development, where we have developed and built and developed land for multifamily in Oregon and Washington. We have an M&A advisory services arm that helps connecting buyers and sellers of businesses. So we have an M&A, and then we just do other investing in other various areas of commerce.
So obviously, with your background in real estate, we're properly going to be speaking today about a commercial real estate, multifamily housing receivership that you worked on. But I know you work on others, but it feels
Yeah.
like this is a great one for you to talk about with your significant history in this. Tell us a little bit before we dive into what was going on specifically with the company. What was happening in the industry? Kind of set the tone of like why this fell into a receivership.
When we came out of the pandemic or went into the pandemic, and a lot of businesses, and not only in real estate, but just were playing with rules that nobody had played before. The money was free, And everyone who was investing, trying to make it through, whether it was any kind of business, and I when I talk about real estate, there's a lot of different kinds of real estate. We're involved in several different receiverships now, multifamily, broken hospitality. And I think what happened was money was free, cap rates were extremely low, and people got into it that were not very well capitalized, became highly leveraged with free money. And as they got into these projects, things changed. The cheese got moved, and interest rates, while they remain low, the cost of construction went up, and people who just weren't well capitalized. And so they may have started out with a first mortgage, but by the time the project got finished, they had a second mortgage with private money, private lenders, and got upside down. And then the cap rates went up. And now what we're seeing as we're coming out of it on the other end, we're seeing the result of all of that activity, and we have oversupply. And so what's happening now, rents are mitigating. Supply is, we're seeing an oversupply. And the pro forma that was used to underwrite these projects no longer works. And I think really that's what's happened. The whole market shifted, and I don't care what it is. Now we're also seeing, even though we're not really talking about ag, but ag is in the Pacific Northwest is in trouble. The wine industry is collapsing. The younger generation is no longer drinking $500 bottle of cab. They're talking to a couple people in the industry, and
To be fair, some of us were never drinking $500 bottles, but
or even $20 bottle cab.
yeah.
Consumption's off about 35%. And worldwide, there's an oversupply. And now you've got people like in the multifamily or in the commercial office space got into it when it was popular. They overpaid for their acreage, and now they've got land that's not worth. So in that area has shifted. So in all these areas, in real estate and ag, it's changed, and which is creating a lot of work for receivers and creditor rights attorneys and bankruptcy attorneys because the shifting landscape.
Yeah, and I guess we should have started with this, but you're out of Oregon, obviously, where
Yeah,
Oregon and
yeah,
Washington State, and
yeah,
obviously down south of you, California,
yeah,
are why you're touching
yeah.
on ag and especially the wine industry in relating to property and valuation. So let's dive into the receivership specifically that we're here to talk about today. What were you brought into? Tell us a little bit about what this was
Yeah,
and
I was contacted by a creditor rights attorney in Portland. This project is in Portland, Oregon. It was a fully completed project. It was a Class A multifamily, 37 doors, and it was mixed use. It had four commercial spaces, retail spaces below, nice underground parking in a great location. So on the surface, everything looked good. I mean, if I were to own something that was in this space, it's the location and the kind of construction that I would have chosen. So as I was brought into it, on the surface, I drove by it and looked at it, and everything looked good, except there was a couple of vacant retail spaces. There was a coffee shop in there, and there was a hair salon, and then a couple of empty spaces. But as we got into it and got appointed, the funds for construction were provided by a private lender, and the defendant in this case was his first venture into building anything. So he was new to it, and on top of that, he thought he was pretty well knowledgeable in this space because he was a commercial appraiser, real estate appraiser. And so when we first got into it, I sat down with him, and he was again pretty defensive about all of this, and also pretty humbled because we have to remember that in a lot of these cases, with just a little bit of turn of fate, it could be you or me. Some of these people just got into it, and they just didn't know what they were getting into. And so therefore, he was pretty humble when we sat down and we took over and passed his laptop to me, and with all of the passwords, we got in and took control of all the accounts. In this case, we own a property management company ourselves. And so we brought in our own people to do the property management, went through all the rents, and The occupancy was at about 90 some percent, but we consider it fully optimized.
Mhm.
But even with that, it wasn't cash flowing.
Yeah.
And this person was using the rents to live. And he, by the way, was living in the facility.
Nicely. Oh,
Yeah.
not nicely.
Yeah.
I mean, we see
Well,
that often in receiverships, right? Is that someone's using it to live beyond their means. But
well,
yeah.
he had the best place in the house as well.
Okay. Yep.
So we got it as we got into it, we first tried to find out where the money was going and
Mhm.
why it wasn't going back to the lender, and found that it was being misused. As we got into it and hired a broker to come in and a leasing broker to lease the vacant commercial space, and did what we could do to try to get 100% occupancy, and did a deep dive into the accounting and what was actually happening. That was in the fall. As we got into it, Mother Nature stepped in, and we had a giant freeze in January of that year, and some of the pipes broke and flooded 8 of the units. And so we ended up, of course, these things always happen at 3 in the morning, and got everything out there. And that created a lot of additional work for everybody. We had to move people into empty units and pay for people for temporary housing. We got the ServPro in there to do all the mitigation, and then dry it out, and brought the contractors in, and and all the while, all the stakeholders like, oh my gosh, what more can happen? And that really extended the time of the receivership. And the other question that came was, all along, the valuation that had been put forth was far exceeded what the true value was, and at the end of the day, what it actually sold for. And we had a valuation of about 18 million, and I think at the end of the day, it sold for around 12 or 13, something like that. And I
Mhm.
think the debt was somewhere in the $15 million range, something like that. So every receivership has its challenges, but this particular one was really kind of multi. One was arriving at an actual cap rate, what we thought it would trade at, providing an accurate evaluation, struggling to get it fully leased up, both commercially and residentially. It turns that throughout this receivership, the person did file for bankruptcy, and I was drawn into the bankruptcy hearing. Ultimately, the bankruptcy was not allowed, but that came after a lot of back and forth in the court system. It became fairly contentious between the debtor and the receiver. Yeah, the creditor was good to work with. They were an out of state lender, and had a good team, and we felt like we collaborated well. But like all good receiverships, at the end of the day, nobody's happy because
Yeah.
the creditor lost money, the debtor lost the asset, moved out, and everybody parted company. So
Yeah. So, I mean, 80 cents on the dollar for a lender, though, out of a receivership is not the worst outcome that we've ever heard, right? I mean,
right,
there are plenty of outcomes that don't reach anything close to that.
right.
What did you do to make sure that you were, although it sounds like this property maybe had less issues in certain circumstances than others, where, as you noted, you were already 90% leased up. I have one right now that's like I think we're up to 13% leased.
Yeah, yeah,
So
right,
90% doesn't sound too bad.
right,
But
right,
obviously that helps with the sale process as you're selling a pretty known commodity to
right.
what you're doing. What did you do to make sure though that you maximize that value and that return to the secured creditor?
Oh, I think it's being diligent, because throughout this time there was also turnover,
Mhm.
and people moving in, moving out for whatever reason. And some of the reasons were they got transferred. Some of them were frightened by the receivership, didn't quite understand it.
Mhm.
We had a meeting of communicated with all the residents, and I think holding it all together took a lot of energy, and I think some concessions to keep people on some renewals. We made some concessions. We actually had to drop some rents. But I think keeping peace in the building was really a challenge, because having the debtor living in the building and really undermining what the receiver was doing and continuing to take control, even though he didn't have control, getting from him master keys and him saying things in the hallway to the various tenants. That was a real problem. So I think in trying to hold the value, really, it was excellent communication by our team with the tenants to keep their nerves calm. But then you throw in a think flooding and
Yep.
mitigation, people coming in, the Servpro coming in with vacuums and that kind of thing. It wasn't really your typical kind of, like you say, that we've had a lot worse in terms of occupancy and
Mhm.
or we have another one. The construction's not finished yet, trying to
Yep.
finish construction. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it was interesting. As you kind of think back on it, and as you kind of maybe even did your own internal debrief on this, what were kind of some of the things that you took away from this that you were like, either I wish I would have known this beforehand, or this is something we're going to utilize moving forward. What were some of the
Well,
key
in this
aspects?
particular case, I would have ensured that the debtor was not on site. That was a big problem. And I think also the other thing I probably what I probably would have done is at this point, what I learned from this one is we have our own commercial property management company,
Hmm.
and we manage about 1,200 doors in the area. I would have not used our own company. I would have brought in somebody completely separate. Though one of the reasons that we got this receivership was that the attorney knew that we knew property management. And
Hmm.
so, but what that does, I think it muddies the water a little bit between receiver and your subcontractors, whether they're plumbers, electricians, real estate brokers, all the people that we bring in a case. I think by bringing in our own company to operate as a property manager created a lot of, when I was at the hearing, at the bankruptcy hearing, that's what they drilled me on. So now I'm speaking as a property manager and as a
Hmm.
receiver, and it became uncomfortable for me. And so going forward, we just don't do that any longer. That's probably our biggest takeaway.
Yeah, I was chatting with someone at one point who was the CEO of a large company, and he said, when I was getting started, I carried two business cards.
Yeah.
One said CEO, and one said like director of sales or something like that. And
Right.
he goes, if I wanted some way to not be the person who had to answer on the spot, I gave him a director of sales card. And then
Right.
there were times where I needed that CEO card if I was talking to investors or something, but it was always good to be able to go back and just say, I need to go check with our leadership. And same principle I think applies to what you were saying, which is, if you have a property management that's dealing with electricians or whatever it is, that can go back and say, like, I have to go discuss this with the receiver first. It's not
Right.
you saying that about you.
That's
And
right.
then,
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
Well, Mr. Buccola, are you the receiver here or are you the property manager? And
Yes.
and it's like, okay, you're
Yeah.
right. And so I think that was a really good hard lesson to learn for me. And
Hmm.
the other thing that, this is off the topic a little bit, when attorneys ask us, how do we charge when
Hmm.
we're doing our declaration, how do we charge? I've been very clear that we do not ask for a commission on the sale of the asset. Some receivers do,
Hmm.
but I have this conversation when I'm talking to attorneys. I ask them a couple same question. One is, what do you not like about receivers? What's your pet peeve? And then also, what are you looking for in a receiver? And typically, one of the things that comes up is billing, and
Hmm.
how you bill. And I think if you build in an hourly rate and a commission on the sale of the asset, you muddy the water on
Hmm.
who do you answer to? Do you answer to the court, or if you're getting a commission, are you answering to the property? I just
Hmm.
that's one thing that going forward, we don't do. And I think that's stick to what you do well. And I'm a good receiver. I know how to do that. I know how to connect. I know how to maneuver the waters between plaintiffs and defendants, but I don't want to also act as a real estate agent as well. So.
Yeah. It's a great tip there. Is there anything you want to leave listeners with before we sign off?
No, I think in the receivership world, again, what's the biggest complaint about receivers? they drag things out sometimes. I like to get in and get out. I've got a short attention span. I want to get in, get out. I want to make sure, and I would encourage all of our other fellow receivers to, in the industry, make sure that you provide reports to the court timely and accurately. That's the other thing I hear all the time, that after the first couple of months, we have to badger our receivers to get things in on time. So I think timeliness and accuracy is really important for the betterment of our entire community, our receiver community. And then I guess finally, CRA, I joined a couple of years ago. It's been a really good fraternity to be in. I have collaborated with many of our members. One of them is actually working with me right now on another case, and I think it's make sure that we use each other and collaborate with one another to enhance the reputation of the receivers, because they honestly they don't I don't say they don't have a good reputation, but we're kind of a necessary evil, and they bring us in because they have to. So since we are in the game, it's nice to act professionally and be professional and associate ourselves with other professionals.
Yeah. Well, that's a great advice. Thank you so much, Gene, for joining us.
Good.
We really appreciate it, and we'll look forward to all the feedback we get on this episode.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for joining Navigating Receiverships, brought to you by the Commercial Receivers Association. Find more information at commercialreceiver.org and catch every Navigating Receiverships podcast by subscribing through your favorite platform today.